Wow, what an audience and what wonderful speakers that have preceded me, and the Energizer was fantastic. Thank God it came at the right time. Um, as you can see, I'm not talking like Nida did of 30 years or 3 decades, or Mr. Iron spoke about 33 years. I'm talking about 6 decades plus, so I'm a bit of a fossil. But I just love the fact that I'm here and have this space in the symphony of early learning years to be talking about the magical layers of social emotional learning. And I today will be speaking to all of you and all the generations sitting here, and especially the little ones, of three things. One is a path of self-discovery, to be able to not undermine yourselves as teachers, as parents, and even as children, to think that you don't have those layers, you do. Number two, to be able to look at how you engaged with social emotional learning and its different formats as you went through the journey. And the third is, how do you become a movement for early years? Because that is so critical. So let's have a bit of fun in how I'm going to be sharing with you my journey. And the journey begins when I'm very little, maybe 1.5 years of age or 1. And I remember it through my senses, the way I heard it. Choo choo karti aayi chiriya, dal ka dana lai chiriya, chor bhi aaya, मोर भी आया, बंदर भी आया, भालू भी आया, कौवा भी आया, काए 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 काए, चूं चूं करती आई चिड़िया. My mother was trying to feed me with music and rhythms, and also the unfamiliar or the familiar in terms of the animals that would soon occupy my worldview. What I would try and put the names and images to. And here it becomes nutrition with songs, and there you start to open your senses. And then my second bit is being able to look at how do I do my gross and fine motor skills. I make mud toys. Endless amount of mud toys in so many shapes, including my mud rotis, and seeing it, all of this being dried under the sun, the power of the sun. And not just that, finding my other great aunt, my Amma, who was a fantastic cook. And I loved to be with her by the side, especially when the Mannat ke pedas, pede bante, they were being made. And I would say, I would come and powder with sugar, I would powder your pedas. And there she would be, and a bit later, I would see myself sneaking 1 peda, 2 peda, 3 pedas. And she would say, but there were 100, now there are 97. What happened to the other 3? And there I would be. But imagine the sensation of looking at that burnt milk, the cardamom that went on that, the sugar, and those smells that completely inundated me. Those kind of creative explorations are what our lives are made of. My arguments with my grandmother at a very young age, my Nanna I would call her, and I say, you love, there's birth order matters to grandparents. They love the firstborn much more than they love the secondborn. Isn't that so? Isn't that so? And that's what she would do. And I would say to her, why are you not loving me as much as you love her daughter's firstborn and her son's firstborn, my older sister? And why are you not making me select the sweets first? Why are you making this difference? Why are you asking us to be quiet on the table when my dada walks in from the court? He was a judge. And why are you asking us to be quiet? He's our best pal. When he comes, we make him, in his room, we are sitting and tying ponytails around him. He's telling us about the stories. He will bring marzipans from the trees. Why are you creating this false space? And I was trying to learn boundaries. I was trying to learn formal and informal spaces as a young child, trying to make sense, but also fighting for my rights at a very young age of maybe 3 years, 3.5 years, of fighting for my gender, fighting for my equality, and saying, why is this discrimination? I think it's also very important that as you are growing, you're looking at why routines matter. Routines matter a lot to children. I'm sure to all of you, getting up early, getting ready for school, getting to the school and say, where to put my bag, how to sit around to look at my stories, when to eat the midday snack, how to tidy up, when to climb the small trees in the school. They matter all the time. And when to wait in the evening, in my days and age, when there was no television, nothing, but for Radio Pakistan and Moni Amit singing, Suno pyare bachcho, yahan aao tum, sunaye jo kuch hum, to so jao tum. Those were our daily stories on the radio. So let's not undermine those daily stories that used to come to me. And then, these routines make a big difference. Here I am, a child, again of 3 years of age. I am the first generation post-partition, born in 1956. You can guess my age. And then we were a home where one set of grandparents came from Lucknow, the other set came from Firozpur. And there we are, 8 and 10 Fane roads, just behind Lahore High Court, a door in between, large families, maybe 4 families living in these places. And me at age 3, 2, discovering the bylanes, the geography of this place, looking at the rooms that were welcoming, the rooms that were formal, the rooms where we collected, because the whole family was interested. The Lucknow walas and the Lahore walas were all very passionate about doors and basant and kites, and there was a room where you saw all this color. And then there were rooms such as my grandparents as fathers, both of them, and my father, lawyers, their chambers were in the house in a section. And there you couldn't touch the books, but the books smelled just so. Who's got family of lawyers somewhere here? There are loads of books to refer to, and then they smell just so. But again, that was being out of bounds. But imagine discovering those geographies, feeling the textures and becoming textured. And I think it is so important. Simple things like winter sun, putting your razais out to be sunned, your clothes, your shawls, your dupattas, your sweaters to be sunned, and us jumping on it, and mother saying, stop it, get off those clothes. But just the joys of fruits, the skins of the fruits, and feeling the taste and the smell, the shapes, the mangoes, the jamun, the tarboos, the watermelon, the oranges, the dry fruits. Can you feel them? I felt them then, and they became a part of my being. And I am building a story where your childhood and your homes do matter, where you speak at length at night. I'm talking about pre-air conditioner days, where there was no air conditioner. You slept outside on the maseris, covered by the mosquito nets, and you're trying to put yourself to some sleep and talking to the stars and the moons endlessly. Those were less polluted days of Lahore. You could sit and talk and imagine that you were that shooting star, and what were you doing on the moon then? And I remember, and being able, my aunt, my khala would say, sing to us, Chanda mama dur ke, खोए पकाए बूढ़ के आप खाएं थाली में मुन्ने को दें प्याली में endlessly, and then sprinkling water on our beds. But happiness was festivals also. The festivals of Holi. Remember, half my parentage came from Lucknow. Holi was normal. It didn't matter which religion you belonged to. It was the best thing that I remember as a 2-year-old, as a 3-year-old, waited for Holi to come, where we could all enjoy the water and the color, and loved the Eid, and loved, of course, the annual puppet show. In those days, this was a family gathering. All the generations said, we were 4 generations. My great-grandmother was alive also, watching the puppets and seeing the wicked, scheming uncle, who's against the princess. And this is all happening behind a charpai. And the strings are, and us going behind and saying, how do they do it really? How does it really happen? And puppets remain a very central part of our lives and story. But more than that, understanding or not understanding conflicts and arguments. You almost knew when an argument would happen. There could be a conflict. What do you do when a conflict happens? How do you take that sense of fear and sadness when conflicts would happen? How would you go and talk to your siblings to make sense out of it? How do you cope with that? How do you look for that perfect relative in that those 2 homes with about 4 or 5 families living? You went to the nicest relative who would make you cuddle, make you heal, get over those conflicts. That built resilience, courage, empathy. Those are the kind of relationships. Remember, we are coming to the 3 C's. We are coming to the 2 R's just before. Those are things. And I'm trying to build a story that schools and homes matter together. We must not forget that the child who's come, and I'll tell you in a minute, the child who's walked into your class carries a lot. A lot. And let's not forget the cake pastry wala who would walk in. There were vendors who were allowed to come into the homes. The kulfi wala with the ice cream fed on the leaf. The kalai wala, you don't even know that word anymore. They would come to shine your old utensils. And the mashki wala who would come in this leather carrier to drop water so that at least there would be cool air coming from, but with the cool air, the smell of the fresh mud in the summer. I cannot forget them. They were the ones who were allowed to come. They came with their chants, and I lived with those chants. And I still live with them. But look at the richness of families coming from 2 different ends. Shias, Sunnis, Sayyid, Fala, Dimka, coming from Kashmir, coming from Lucknow. But they brought their own different languages. In my home, 5 languages were spoken. And we were all used to that. We looked at identity. Muharram was there. You had to wear certain kinds of clothes, different kind of music, without any instruments. What was all that? It was still beautiful music. The clothes, the different gararas, all of that was part of it. Angarkhas, music, different kinds of music. But this living with diversity is what makes us who we are. Do we really talk about diversity? Do we celebrate diversity as something which produces harmony and richness? And my first rebellion, I cannot forget that, at age 4 in 1960. First school, early years, nursery, 4-year-old. I wanted to walk out of my classroom. I created such disruption because I didn't like the book. The book said, something about Rover is my dog and Mary is my mother. I said, I don't have either as my mother or my dog. And why do I have to read this? My second war of rebellion was in St. Denis in Murray, not too far from here. We were shipped off from Karachi to learn some manners over there. But they fined me 10 rupees for speaking in Urdu. Darling, I haven't won both those wars. I told my father, you fetch me because they're not allowing me to speak in my mother tongue, or I come home. I'll walk. He said, don't you dare walk. He brought me back. But those 2 wars I haven't won. We are still behaving exactly in the same manner. I won't show that to you, but just to say that today I'm learning through my grandchildren. My grandchildren belong to those exactly alpha and beta generations. And they are trying to tell me some new things. This one that you see on your right, perhaps, Alisa, who's 3 years old. Yesterday, just before I was coming, there's a video, but time is short, that she loves Urdu through her grandmother. She has learnt 20 books. Every new book that comes, she has to be reading that with me, God knows how many times. She's 3 years old. She remembers the title of each one, if you see that. And then the first book that I've written for children called Soneri or Raya, which is about climate change and the food plate, is dedicated to the other child. And I think it's important to be able to have that communication across generations. And this brings me to how we put all of this together. Remember, 90% of our brain development takes before we are turning 5. 90%. We are undermining all these wonderful children who've been here, the people who were here earlier. They are incredibly wired. I was incredibly wired. I'm telling you everything from my little, like till the age of 6. And so the children today are incredibly wired with so many more stimulants than us. But remember the social emotional learning story, the art of self-regulation, the art of empathy. How do you live with conflict? How do you become self-aware? How do you learn kindness? How do you look at peace and celebrate diversity? These are all part of the social emotional learning wheel. And that I wanted to share, that the whole aspect of self-regulation, self-management, relationships, all of these are part of social emotional learning. And these are where you see, on the one hand, that there should be no barriers between home experiences and school experiences. And the second time, when you're looking at how, on the other hand, at the meta level, how the governments are making their policies, laws, instruction materials, and what we heard today is all being done, must have social emotional learning at the center of it all. For social emotional learning is not about non-cognitive learning. Please, there is a very big false binary that there's cognitive learning and then there's social emotional learning. No, this is not about social emotional learning and cognitive learning are one and the same end of the same spectrum. So please don't undermine it. And I think the last part that I wanted to share with you is, what is the story here? And every school that you've gone to, whether it is a private school or a government school, you see the largest number of children sitting in the early years program, in pre-primary. And yet we don't plan for it. Do you know, in Pakistan, perhaps we have 40% children, according to ASAR data, that are enrolled in early childhood. And according to the government's PSLM data, it's perhaps still 19%. I think that's much undervalued. But early childhood education as a sector receives less than 1% of the budget. Now imagine, this is where your power lies, the children of early years who really then know how to leverage society and becomes responsible citizens. And that's where we invest lowest. The government acknowledges the roles of early childhood. We've got the best possible policies. We've got them in the laws. We've got them in the plans. We've got them in the curriculum. We've got them in just about everything. But to do holistic early childhood, you also need the resources, the human resources. You need to be able to see that that visibility is also reflected on the engagement with also other sectors, because we know the challenge of health and nutrition is big also in non-elite settings. But the low investments in addressing growth and social, emotional, and cognitive learning really need to be completely changed. And that means from this TEDx, can we create a movement for early childhood education in Pakistan? It is the only pathway to feeling positive, to be able to do things which will change society, make them more equitable, so that you have the agency of the child nurtured from when they are very small, all the way for a lifetime. It's an investment into a lifelong learning process. That's the pathway, but don't ever forget the magic of the early years, especially through social emotional learning. And don't forget the connection between the home and the school and the classroom. Thank you very much.